Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world, and welcome to today's conversation on Gift of Healing TV. Our topic for this evening is challenging yourself. And I'm fairly certain we're all going to have plenty to share, but I'm going to start by saying, and because I've got two Davids here, just to confuse the issue, but I love it. David T, or D2, as he said to call him, say hi.
Hi, I'm D2 tonight.
And Scott, are you there?
I certainly am here. My camera went out again, and I'm not sure the why of it.
Okay.
Very odd thing. But hi, how are you today?
Well, we're glad to have you with us. Hopefully you'll become more than a disembodied voice.
We will, and I'll be right back. Thank you.
Excellent. And finally, our guest, David McLeod. David, thank you so much for joining us for this program. And just share a little about yourself.
Oh boy, a little about myself. Well, my name is David McLeod. I am a certified master life coach. I am also a senior partner at the Wellness Universe. I have lots of gifts and offerings that I produce. I have my Life Mastery TV program. I have my Soul Empowerment program. I also have Soul Chat, which I do on the Wellness Universe. In addition to that, I am currently in the process of building up a website called Magnificence Life Mastery School, which is going to be going live on February 14th. And you might be asking, well, why February 14th? Well, because I think it's all about self-love, and it's all about time for us to re-own that date for self-love, not just for loving everyone else. Because if we can't do self-love, we can't really do love of others. But anyway, that's a little bit about me.
And I think the self-love thing is maybe got to be our first challenge for ourselves, hasn't it? Because I don't know about the rest of you, but I was never taught it was okay to love myself. It was very much about it's everybody else, and you're not even meant to think about yourself. So it's not a matter of you come at the bottom of the list, you're not even on it. And so I think it's really important, and it's very difficult to be able to go from not even thinking about yourself to finding that it's really important to love yourself. And when you do, you can bring so much more love to others. That the same goes for caring and for so many other things. If you actually do it for yourself, then you are actually being able to give so much more of that to others. So, Scott, you're grinning there.
Well, you're talking about service. You're talking about all of things we've talked about before, about how you challenge yourself, how and it's a double-edged sword. And I think we've discussed this before about how much of yourself do you give out, and how much do you fill. That topic of self-love. People say, yeah, well, I go get a manicure and a pedicure, and I go get a massage once a month. Not really the stuff we're talking about. It's that filling the cup to make sure that you can be full, so that you can be present, so that you can be in your full force, that you can be the essence of who you are, in order to be able to be present and give fully to those people around you. And that's a challenge each and every day. I think we can all agree on that. Some days are more challenging than others. Sometimes trying to get on the program and stay here without anything happening is a challenge. So it's very interesting. And David brought this topic up. And I think David likes to challenge life each and every day on his terms. One of the things I admire and respect about him is that he pushes. For me, he constantly says, well, yeah, but what about this? And he pushes those boundaries open. And he just, for me, he's broadened the universe. He's broadened my way of thinking. He's broadened how I view things. He's broadened how I am able to view different situations and how to look at it differently, and actually be much more open. And that's a gift that he's given to me. And the challenge for me is to always augment and be a partner with projects that we've done, to be able to do that and try to build on that. So it's been a great collaboration because I've known David for years, and it really has been a wonderful collaboration.
Well, thank you for that, Scott. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the accolades. I think that there is some, well, obviously there's some truth in everything that you say, but I do resonate with this. I think that the idea of challenge, if we think of it always as a challenge, whatever is in front of us, that may have a negative impact on our thinking. It may give us this idea, oh, it's going to be too hard. It's going to be something I can't do. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. We make up all these stories in our head about giving ourselves good reasons why we shouldn't do it. And I think that the topic title of this, challenging yourself, is really important because it's not so much about appearing to others to have accomplished something by, overcoming and whatever. I think what's more important for me, speaking personally, is to just honor the truth of who I am as much as possible in every aspect of my life. And that means that I have to recognize that sometimes my ego mind wants me to shift and do things in order to make you happy, in order to please you, in order to give you a better impression of who I am, in order to make you laugh, in order to do all these ridiculous things that really I can't control how you react anyway. But that's what my ego mind wants me to do. And I learned at a very young age to abide by my ego mind. And so my ego mind was in charge of my life for at least the first 40 years. And it wasn't until that time that, everything kind of hit a breaking point and I realized this wasn't working. I had to make a shift. And in making that shift, my whole life kind of fell apart, but in reality, it didn't fall apart. That was just the external appearance of things. In reality, it actually fell together because in what was going on was I was understanding on a very deep level without being able to articulate it in words. I was understanding that my ego mind, I was fighting back. That was the biggest challenge of all. I was saying, I don't really like the way my life has turned out. Thank you so much. I'm going to start doing it from my heart rather than from my ego mind. I don't know how to do that, but so I need some help. I'm going to go find that help, And so I think the biggest challenge really, Sara, you mentioned self-love. Self-love is a challenging part of it. And when I am truly in a place of self-love, then I am able to show up in my fullness, in whatever venue I happen to be in, and I can do that and not really care so much whether you are happy with the way I show up or not. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to go and deliberately do things to upset you. That's not my plan. But I'm also not going to do things to avoid upsetting you, because that's not going to serve me either. You see what I'm saying? There's sometimes one works and sometimes another works. So to me, the idea of challenging myself has to do with being authentically real and in full integrity with all of the aspects of who I really am. That's what it means to challenge myself. For me, other people might have different perspectives.
D2.
My first name's R2. Right. There's so much being spoken about that I can so resonate, and I wanted to speak as well. But I'm going to take it back to the bit at the beginning of about the self-love. And I think I was once in the corporate world, if we want to call it that way, and it was such a challenging time for me. I could never settle. But you go to these settle in one particular space, and may come to that later. But you've done these courses, and year on year, and list all your strengths, list all your weaknesses. And everybody's done them. And our weaknesses are like this, and our strengths are like this every time. And it's because we are not, as you say, fully aligned with ourselves. We're not recognizing ourselves and giving ourselves that self-love of who we are, and patting ourselves on the back of every day and say, that's been a tough day, but I'm still here. And we forget to do that. And we so think, God, that was a day, but we don't say, well done, because you got through it. And it's as simple as that we can start with. I think that we can start loving ourselves. And when we truly get to know ourselves, like you said, David, when we truly get ourselves aligned with who we are, we can become our authentic self, and we're not afraid to speak. And we're not afraid to go and say, well, this is me, because all through our lives, we've tried to fit in to make everybody happy. So you're happy, but it doesn't work. And it goes back to this self-love. Once you know who you are and you can love yourself for who you truly are inside, I think you can really then step into your power and then say, well, I'm more than what I thought I was.
Can I add something to that? First of all, I love that you brought up this idea of my strengths and my weaknesses, because yes, I think we've all done one of those. But I invented a new process. Well, I'm sure I didn't invent it, but I found out and I learned about this process by going within. And I had this question in my mind, and I said, let me just take a list of all the things that I think are good about myself. And now let me take another list and write down all the things that I think are bad about myself. And now I'm going to go through that second list, and I'm going to ask myself a question. These are qualities or characteristics of me, and I, for some reason, think they are bad. That's why I put them on this side of my list. But I'm going to challenge myself, here we go, to find 2 reasons why that quality is actually beneficial, that how it serves me in some beneficial way. And I'm going to write both of those on the other side, on the good side. And guess what happens? By the time you're done, you've got more than twice as many good things as bad things. This is a powerful, powerful way to really get connected into the truth of who you are, and to recognize that the things that you think are bad, well, maybe they're bad, maybe they're not, but they've got some value, otherwise you wouldn't engage in them. So find out what that value is. That's my challenge to everybody here. And I wanted it on the recording so that people who watch the recording could get it too. I call it hyper listing, by the way.
I remember years ago, long before I actually found this path, for want of a better way, before I went through my healing journey. And I think it must have been an interview, and sort of somebody said, okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And I think I listed my weaknesses first, and I said, but actually they're also my strengths.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I can't answer the why, but maybe it was sort of something along the lines of sort of punctuality and wanting to do things properly, etc., because they are actually strengths. Doing a job properly, and we should challenge ourselves. Oh, right, I can do that in 5 minutes. I remember being asked to time trial the job I was doing. And I absolutely turned around and said, no, you are not time trialing me. And they said to me, but Sarah, I said, 5 minutes to half a day, depending on how much of a mistake people have made. You're not time trialing me. And that's before I really found my gumption. So it's also a challenge to yourself to find that voice within you that stands up for you. And that's not so easy to do. But these days, it's, Sarah, you can't speak to people like that. Yes, I can.
Is it a positive or a negative? So anger is a protector within you. When you, there we go again. But when you are in anger, sometimes the things you say, people take it, well, they're angry, we won't listen to it. But the anger is there to protect you. And it's not a bad thing. It's all in perspective and how I may have to go out and come back again, but I'm listening.
This actually particular thing that I was thinking about was when I was at an affair and an event, and I was talking to people that were coming to talk to me. And I was pretty open with people and honest with people. And I did that on one occasion, and I got a phone call afterwards, which is actually pretty unheard of. And the individual came on and she said, I was so cross with you. And I thought, oops. Then she turned around and said, you were the only person who's been honest with me. And so it's not a matter of anything coming from anger. It is a matter of, I suppose, challenging people as to why things are happening in their lives. And it's challenging myself to be true to my understandings and potentially understanding what's going on for somebody else without being in any form of judgment. And that's another challenge, not to be in judgment. So sort of, which of the Davids wants to take that?
Well, I wanted to say, first of all, this is something that I teach everybody, and I say it a lot. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. Let's start with that. There are only emotions, and each one of them serves a different purpose. Anger usually arises in a situation where I believe that something has been taken from me, or I'm not getting what I want. That's what usually anger comes up with. So yeah, I agree with you, Scott. In a sense, it is a way of protecting myself and making sure my boundaries aren't violated. So in that sense, anger can be a very powerful force for you. But anger doesn't have to be the kind of thing that means that you throw dishes around, or you blow up a building, or you do some ridiculous, terrorist activity. You can have the energy of anger, and you can realize, I am being driven to do something. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of power in that anger, And so passion and anger are almost the same energy. The only difference is you may have a lot more joy associated with passion than you do with anger, right? So usually there's fear associated with anger, and that's what causes the behavior and stuff. But I think that it's important for us to recognize that we all have emotions. It's not that we are those emotions. And this is another problem that I hear people saying, you're a very angry man. Well, no, I'm not. I'm a man who experiences anger from time to time. That part I'll agree with, but I'm not an angry man any more than you're a happy woman, So we all have these things. They come and go. They serve us. They provide us with information that we can then use to continue in our lives, and we can then use, this idea of challenge. Now, you talked about having no judgment. I think one of the qualities of being human is we all have egos. And an ego that becomes identified with the mind is what I now call ego mind. An ego mind tends to try and take control of everything. And in order to do that, it uses the power of judgment, especially judgment of others. Yeah, it does judgment of self too, but it points outward. It tries not to focus too much on itself, right? It's always projecting outwards. Now, judgment by itself is really not a bad thing. You know, we make judgments all the time. Is this safe for me to cross the street now? Should I wait until that bus goes? You know, these are questions of judgment, interpretations of the data that are going around on us, and making conclusions about what's the right action in this moment. So not all judgment is bad, and we shouldn't judge judgment. So, but at the same time, if I can be aware of my judgments, this is where it really can be useful. I can now say, oh, I notice I'm having a judgment about Scott here right now. So now the question I can ask myself is, what am I projecting onto Scott that I'm not willing to look at within myself? That's the power of judgment, if we are willing to look at it. Because the judgment points to the projection, and then the projection helps me to see an aspect of myself that I wasn't necessarily willing to see before. So I say, rather than trying not to judge, instead try to be aware of and fully understanding of your judgments. That to me is a more useful kind of approach. And that is challenging, because sometimes I'm like anybody else. My ego mind gets activated, and I'll have judgments going like crazy, and I won't pay attention to them. You know, that is to say, I won't think about them in terms of what they reflect back about me. You see? So if I can just quiet my ego mind enough, then I can come back and say, okay, right, I had this judgment, and what is it about myself that I'm not really willing to look at? That's my perspective on it.
David.
I'm going to come back to the use of your voice and speaking up and challenging yourself with a voice, because I think that's something I've found really a strong lesson for me to when I came into this world of my work with spirit and the healing and everything else. And because that was like 35 years ago, it was a very different time then. And I kind of voluntarily, should I say, kept my mouth shut about the work and what I was doing for fear of judgment. And it was really hard to speak about things, about what my experiences were, because I had a different friendship circle then. And I was afraid to speak up. And that was my challenge at the time, was really to use my voice, because I learned along the way that if I didn't say things as it was, they got really misconstrued. And I made, I know people who may have watched this have heard this story before, but when I was working with spirit, I said, oh, I'm going to be going up to my spooky friends, which was my group that I was working with. Of course, everybody ran away and thought I'm just sitting there chatting to inviting all my spirit friends in. And a story came out of that, but that taught me really to start saying, speaking up and challenging me with my voice, because I've always been quiet, surprisingly. But this was a challenge for me. That was like a personal challenge for me to go in and say, you've got to say what's going on. You've got to make it clear. And I felt I'm still learning that. But as you challenge yourself to speak more about your truth and be honest with yourself, the energy in your life and what you're bringing through or what you want to say is so much easier and more comes through. So, yeah, it's a continued challenge and to speak your own truth in case you don't fit in. But the more you can do, and I think that's been one of my biggest challenges in this life, is to get out there and speak my truth, which I'm doing more and more now. But I find it so freeing when you challenge yourself and you get over that obstacle, whatever it is, it's so freeing of your mind and your body and your energy. It's like you grow into more of who you are.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Scott.
Wow. That was really thoughtful. That brought me to a lot of places. When my wife first passed, I was in counseling, and as feelings would come up, we'd name them. And I had the judge, and I didn't realize how often he was a part of my life. How often I spoke through him. It was training from my family. I didn't realize how hypercritical my parents were, basically about everything and everyone. And I had adopted that same persona. And I had driven many, many people away because of that. Because, oh, you're too demanding, you're too judgmental, and I would be, yeah, okay, right, yeah, okay. I was just trying to get through life. But that character of the judge came up. And when he did, it was in the form of my father. And because I always felt I was judged. And when I finally made friends with the judge and said, thank you for your opinion, but I'm going to leave that open. I'm not going to let people know that I know better, that my standards are what counts, and that everybody should live by how I see things. It just doesn't work very well. So I learned to really, much like you said, David won, about, the judgments come up and you go, yeah, okay. You just push them aside. And the feelings that come up, they're not bad. They're trying to protect you, as you said. But again, like anger. I used to have discussion with my wife when I was first married. I forgot. Oh, I know it. I don't remember what the offense was, but she went 3 days. We're living in a small apartment, and she went 3 days without ever acknowledging my existence. Now, this is when I was 21 years old, and after she started talking to me, I said, "Don't ever do that again." Her parents would go weeks if they were angry with each other. Father would be on the couch, and they'd go weeks without it. So she was trained to kind of shut people down. Mm-hmm. And I said, yell, kick, scream, slam doors, throw dishes, go for long walks, take off in the car, do whatever. Well, that's not practical. That's not the way you express anger. I says, well, everyone has the same emotion. They just express it in a different way. They show a different way through their body, through their actions. So we learned how to deal with it as a young couple in our 20s. We learned how to deal with that anger. Later in life, my wife bought a little blue elephant, and when we needed to speak, she put it on the dining room table because it was the elephant in the room that needed to be talked about. And so
I love that.
That was kind of our cue for we got something we got to talk about, and I think naturally, especially in a longer marriage, fights aren't really fights. They're like just different points of view, and you talk about it and you resolve it, and that's it. Right. When you're younger, you have to be right. We've done many shows, I think, and all of us have about being right, about having to be right about when we're right about how we see things. And a lot of that time, as we've spoken about, is judgment, having to be right. And the challenge for me at that point was to not allow the judge in and accept. The challenge for me every day is to accept and allow. And as I've grown to embrace that acceptance, that allowance, compassion, kindness, openness, vulnerability, I see myself in a better light, but I also see everyone else in that same lens, because I see myself and I'm kinder to myself. And it's amazing how people react to that, how they are attracted to that, how I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'2", 220. And so when I'm in a room or I'm next to people, a little intimidating. I never thought of it that way. I never think of myself as this huge, but that's how they saw it. So now, and I was never approachable, and now people approach me. It's a much different feeling. So yeah, that's a challenge, to be able to get to that point where it is what it is.
I wanted to say thank you for saying that, Scott. I was going to write some notes down, but I didn't get this quick enough and I couldn't find my notepad. So I'll just have to remember the wisdom that you just shared.
Well, thank you.
You can always play this back. And that's the joy of what we share, isn't it? So the people maybe think, oh, that's really good, I've got to remember that. Oh, that's really good, I've got to remember that. But just say to yourself, it's okay. This is recorded. I can go back. I can re-listen to a part. Take note of the minute, the second that it is. And you can just go back to that section.
Right.
Challenge yourself to, oh, it's gone now, I'll forget about it. It's challenge yourself. It spoke to you enough that you actually wanted to make a note of it. So challenge yourself not to let it slide. I know we were talking before we went live, and there are times I have ideas pop into my head and I've got to start writing them down. I really have. It's a challenge I've got to make to myself. The problem is they tend to do it in the early hours of the morning, and I really don't want to turn lights on. So it's really important to honor yourself, challenge yourself to honor yourself. And yeah, so many things have been said here, and open to the fact that there potentially are different meanings to the thing that your mind is hearing. And I remember this when I very first started today's conversations with Enolia. And I can't remember what the conversation was about. It was just the two of us, and she'd asked me a question, I'd answered it, and I sat and I listened to her. And my thought was, if you haven't really listened to this, you are going to think that we've disagreed with each other. But if you've really listened to this, what we've done is we've come at it from two different angles. One from the inside out, one from the outside in. So we could be saying exactly the same thing, but in a different way. And so it can be about challenging yourself to stop and think, okay, what have I just heard? You know, like that lady that rang me, who initially was so angry at me, but she gave herself the chance to think about it. To the extent that I got a phone call. She actually came and had a few sessions with me. I have no idea what happened after that. But do you know what? That I think is for all of us. We've touched a life. And hopefully if we've touched it and helped that individual move forward in their own lives. And it's a challenge, and it can be a real challenge to the ego mind, but I want to know what's happening. I want to know where they've got to. I want to know how well that session has been for them. Mm-hmm. But it's not for us to know. I mean, I know I have said to clients have come back to me, they've said, oh, Sarah, what you said to me last time. And I'm thinking, what the heck did I say to you last time? Because I let myself forget. And I've spoken to other practitioners, and they all make copious notes. I said, I don't make any. And they looked at me. I said, any notes I make mean that I am holding on to what is going on in their life. By letting myself forget not making any notes, I am freeing them to let go when they are ready. Now, that can be a real challenge to us because the ego mind really does want to know what's going on. But it's a self-gratification. Oh, I managed to do this. No, I didn't manage to do anything. I offered the energy that supported their healing, their internal healing, to take hold and to do for them what was right for them at that point in time. And that can be a real challenge to us, is to step back from what we bring and allow it to do what is right for that individual, which may not be what we think it should be. David, D2.
D2. Yeah. Recapping a little bit again. This is about a challenge, and I think if we just sit with ourselves and accept who we are right at the beginning, then how do we learn? How do we move on? And everybody will have a different aspect of why we are particularly here at this moment time, and why we are here in this life going through whatever we're going through. But there has to be a reason. And I think you have to challenge yourself, because we go to school to learn in various ways. And I think there's more ways of learning than in a school curriculum. There's many more ways. And there's wider ways of learning, in my opinion. So we have to challenge, we're taught there in a way to challenge ourselves, but also to challenge others, or we've got to get a grade against you. And we forget about challenging ourselves in that moment. And so I think we have to challenge ourselves, because we don't know how far we can go. As a light being in this case, shall we say, or as a soul within this case, we see ourselves in the mirror and think that's who we are. But there's so much more to us than what we see in a mirror. Mm-hmm. And we have to challenge and say, well, can I do this? Can I do that? And it's like, if all the artists judged each other in the world, there'd be no painting on the wall. I'm not as good as him. I'm not as good as her. And there'd be no, oh, I can't paint that because nobody's going to like that. We'd have no art. We'd have no sculpture. We'd have nothing if people didn't challenge themselves to put it out there. And I think we're all here to offer something, and we can challenge ourselves just by pushing ourselves a little bit more, because we are so much more than what we believe we are. And so these challenges are not negative, as some people say, oh, this is we are seeing how far we can grow. And that's what we've got to do. There's no point in being the person at 5 years old, and I'm just grabbing an age with that knowledge, and then getting to whatever age we're meant to be on this pathway, physical age, and still have that 5-year-old awareness. We've got to have that and everything else that we've learned. So we've got to challenge ourselves to see how far we can go and learn. And maybe we challenge ourselves in learning about history. And that's great, because we can look into it. But we challenge ourselves, and it's such an important thing not to be afraid of challenge. And if we try it and it fails, that's not the way to do it. It's just showing us, look for another way. And we challenge ourselves to expand a thought and say, maybe I can do it this way. Maybe I can do it that way. Maybe there's a different way. So I think this challenge of the self is not meant to be hard work, but it really does give so much back to the self when you start questioning or challenging how far you can push yourself or how far you can be.
I'm going to challenge you, D2.
All right.
I kind of know what what the others do, but what do you do for yourself on your creative side? You are a multidimensional being, and there is creativity within you. What do you do for yourself to be creative?
It's really interesting because you asked that because I've been having some mindfulness lessons one-to-one because I have a bit of anxiety, believe it or not, on getting out of the house, would you believe? But I'm doing some mindfulness with that. And that come up to me in a question I was having with my teacher last week. What do you do to challenge yourself? And I started looking and I'm going, oh my goodness, for my creativity. And I used to work in the theatre a bit. So I'm going back to create in the theatre next year. I'm going to walk back into the theatre. And that's really where I'm going for myself, for this creativity to bring things back onto the stage again. So that's really interesting you asked me that. But my work, I challenge my work to see if I can get, let's say, greater connection or be open and challenge myself in my work to say, okay, I'm ready to accept more, like I've been guided with new things this year. But on a personal level, my creativity is I'm going to challenge myself to go back into the theatre.
Beautiful. You know, I think that there's a point that might just be slipping by our awareness here. And that is, I want to say that none of us, no one anywhere on the planet has to do anything. We are not required to do anything. This idea of challenging ourselves is merely a way of asking ourselves the question, where am I now and where do I want to be in the next moment? And then saying, okay, that's where I want to be. How do I get there? That's really what self-challenge, I think, is about. Nobody is required to do anything. If your choice is to stay in your comfort zone, cuddled up in a blanket, watching television all day long or whatever, okay, that's your choice. It's not my choice, but that's your choice. And I will say this, I have been there. And I'm sure others of us have been there from time to time too. Maybe not watching TV, but we find a way to get ourselves into this comfort zone thinking we're doing ourselves a favor. But after a while, that comfort zone turns into a coffin if we're not careful. So the question I like to ask myself is, if I really truly want to get to that place, what do I need to do to challenge myself to get there? Not I must do this or anything else, but I have the option to do this if I want to get there. Now, I agree with you, David, that we fail far more than we succeed, but there really is no such thing as failure. What we really do instead is we try all kinds of different things, and some of them serve us, some of them don't. And let's face it, some people they appear to us to be natural at something. They try something once and they got it, right? Well, they try something once that we wanted to do and kept failing at, and they got it. That's what we really notice. But they have their own challenges, those people. You know, they may do something that we find trivial easy, and they struggle with it. So remember to honor yourself for where you are. That's really, I think, the biggest challenge of all. That is part of self-love, which we talked about at the beginning of this program. Honor where you are now and just welcome the opportunities that are in front of you for moving to the next level, for whatever that is for you. I think that's really what we're talking about here. And especially since we're now we're on the threshold of a new year. You know, January 1st is right around the corner. And, you know, we typically celebrate. We have a Happy New Year celebration. While many people look out and say there's nothing but chaos out there, how can I possibly be happy about that? Well, it doesn't matter what's going on out there. What matters is what's going on in here. That's what we have to deal with. And I say, if you are grounded, centered, and connected to the truth of who you are, then whatever's going on outside in the world will have less and less impact on you. And you'll be able to navigate quite easily through that space, because you are a divine, magnificent being of light and love, just happening to have a human experience, a temporary human experience at that. So, as I said, you don't have to do anything. You could sit quietly in your, as you like to say in England, in your garden and just meditate the rest of your life, if that's what you want to do. And that actually might be one of the best things you could do.
Yeah.
We don't know.
It's by being, isn't it? You can do more just by being, in a way.
I like that. And somebody said this to me the other day, and I had not heard it this way before. But she said, we're not human beings. We are humans being. I thought, whoa, I've heard it differently. I mean, we're not human doings, we're human beings, right? And I really liked that what she said, we're not human beings, we are humans being. Okay, love it. So thank you for reminding me about that, David.
Oh, pleasure. Yeah, that's fascinating. I love that. And it's so simple.
Yeah.
I think the most powerful things tend to be the simplest of things. Mm-hmm. Our mind tries to complicate things. So maybe then that's another challenge for us. Don't look for the complications. Look for the simplicity within things. I know it means something else, and it's something to do with the forces, and it's KISS. And I'm sure many people, my reaction is keep it simple, sweetheart. Because I also don't think it supports people to use the S word that they use at the end of that. It's about helping people to understand about. And some of the things that have happened have been the simplest things. You know, sort of, do we really need a house full of stuff? Keep your life simple. If you declutter, yeah, I could really do with doing some of that. I've done some. I did quite a lot last year. But we could really do with decluttering our lives, because everything and do we own it? Or does it own us? And there's nothing in my house that owns me. I own it. And think about the difference. If something happened to this house tomorrow, as bless you happened to you, David, something happened to this house tomorrow and it's all its contents, I would be fine.
Correct.
I don't need to replace it. You know, my mother's reaction when my ex-mother-in-law said, I'm going to smash all her ornaments, because I've got some really beautiful ornaments and they were quite expensive. But when my mother-in-law said that to my mum, my mum's reaction was, get up there, Sarah, and get them now. This is when my marriage broke up. And it was just like, they're things. I was not in, even then without understanding, I was in that place of, they're things. They're not important.
That's right. Yep. You can't take them with you.
No, exactly. You can't. You can't take things with you. You can't take money with you. You can only take with you what you hold in your heart. And I know that there's a saying out there somewhere to do with that. But you can only take what's in your heart. So store the important things in your heart. And that can't be things. Okay. So sort of...
I remember just going back to your KISS principle. I'm pretty sure it was Albert Einstein who said, now I'm going to mangle this, I'm not going to get it quite right, but it was something about the effect of keep things as simple as possible, but no simpler. And so in other words, let's not try to simplify this to death.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that. Now he might have said something completely different, but that's how I remember it. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, so true.
And that is a challenge at the moment for everybody, isn't it? To
Yeah.
keep things simple. It
Yep.
really is. And I think that's the healthiest way to try and be at this moment in time.
Yeah. Somebody's got a dog who wants to join in.
It's me. It's mine. I'm really sorry.
No,
Who
She
loves
said
the sound of
somebody
dogs
come past
barking?
the house.
Who let the dogs out?
Don't apologize. Don't apologize. Because again, that is really important, that our pets are actually an important part of our life.
Right.
And if we choose to have them, then it is up to us to take care of them. I know some animals have been amazing at taking care of their owners, but on the whole, it's for us to take care of them. And that can be a challenge at times, having had 5 cats at one stage. But I love the lot. We are coming towards the end, and I want to give everybody a chance to say if there's anything that you feel you would like to add that we haven't maybe touched on in this conversation. We won't go to Scott first. Let's go to David McLeod.
Or Scott. Yeah, I think this principle of what you've spoken about, David, has been fascinating. And it's really, I hope so many people have taken out of it what they can, and they connect into you if they need to. But it's really been a real fascinating evening for me. So it's made me think about myself. And your word, Scott, was, what do you do to yourself? And outside, what do I do to challenge myself? My challenge at the moment is to be more of my true self with my voice, which I'm learning as I go along, and not being afraid to speak. So I've gained a lot out of this, and it's really made me think. So thank you, both of you.
Scott.
Apparently, my challenge is getting a new computer set up so that I don't keep losing my. I'm gonna stay on like this just so I don't lose it. For me, the biggest challenge has been in how do I define myself? How do I find who I am? When I was younger, I defined myself as what I did, who I was in my family, and that's really how I define myself. And I challenge everybody out there who's listening, who hears this, who sees this. Well, apparently they can't see me. Of how they define themselves and what I am. What am I now? And I define myself a little bit by a few words. I'm a dragon rider, a unicorn whisperer, a spirit guardian, a shepherd of chaotic energy, a foundation builder, a stagehand, an elevator operator. And I use those terms because it's what I use. It's what I do with clients. And the end of that is I am whatever is needed in that moment. And I'm everything and I am nothing. And in being that, their judgment is gone, expectation is gone, and I am who I need to be in just that moment. And that's where I strive to be on an everyday basis. And thank you for that challenge, David, bringing that up.
David.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on. This has been a very enjoyable conversation, so I wanted to say thank you for that. I guess my invitation to anybody who is listening to the live or to the recording is to just honor yourself for who you are and for all of who you are. And this may require doing what David has already suggested, getting down to the core of the truth of who you are. And you can do this by, one way I do it is by sitting in front of a mirror and just asking myself, who are you? And watching myself as I respond with whatever is true in that moment. And often, the answers that come up generally start at very high level. I am David. I am a man. I am a teacher. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I'm a poet. And you notice I'm bringing it down closer and closer. And eventually, I realize that all of those are just things I do. They're roles that I play in my life. As I get deeper and deeper, as I peel away more and more layers, I get down to more esoteric things like I am a spiritual being. I'm everything. I am nothing. Words like that start to come up, and I do this quite frequently, and I begin to understand that the truth of who I am is far, far, far deeper than I ever thought it was, before I started doing that kind of exercise. So my reason for inviting that challenge is because the more of us can get down to that truth, the better I think the world will be in the long run. And so we are contributing to a better world just by getting down and knowing who we really are and standing in that truth without apology and without regret. That's my suggestion.
Who are you? Do you listen to that internal voice, not the ego mind, but the voice that is potentially not yours, or if it is yours, it's your soul voice? A number of years ago, I was thinking, why do mythical beings come to you in meditations? I couldn't find information anywhere about the energies other than obviously their myths and legends, which weren't helpful particularly. And I remember thinking about it one day, and it's not a voice, but the words were in my head. You're doing it. Thanks. It's just like, okay. And so I was then encouraged to sit with pen and paper and just allowed the words flow. I bought a couple of books about the myths and legends of these beings, but I was asked not to share the myth and legend. But to start with, it was read the myth and legend, and there would be a word that would pop out. And they were always about positive things. And I found myself channeling. Then I found myself channeling from the dragons that guard over the Earth's crystals. Then I found myself channeling light language. It's trust yourself. Trust that inner voice that is potentially your soul voice. So it's a challenge to listen to that because it can be really difficult. I think the first time it happened was I'd just given up my job. I was standing in my little house, and it was just like, okay. And then the words were in my head, time to move on. And it was just like, what? I have just given up my job. What are you talking about? And I just went, you bring it, I'll do it. And that's how I ended up in this house. Because I listened. It doesn't have to be words, but it can be like a message. You don't have to hear things. We can, and it's challenge ourselves to listen to those. And if you don't understand, then do what I did. You bring it, I'll do it, because I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. But it did mean moving, because my reaction was, well, where am I moving to? I was only moving a few miles away. So I'm now in Bournemouth. My address was more like Poole than Bournemouth. But it's trusting, and it's a challenge to trust when those things come. And I know, D2, that you channel for your aura mists. And I think we all channel in our own unique ways. I don't know about,
we all are.
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm working with clients and I suddenly think, where the heck did that come from? And you found yourself voicing something and you're thinking, what? And it's trust that. And I get it. It's not easy, but it's a challenge yourself to listen to that, for want of a better way of putting it, sacred inner voice rather than the monkey mind. So I am going to say a massive thank you to all three of you. And I am going to make sure that your websites are under the video on YouTube, so that folks, if you want to connect with any of us, if something one of us has said really speaks to you, we are here for you to connect with us. We're happy for that. And it doesn't matter how old this video is. You know, if we are still around, if we're still sort of living on this planet, you know, connect with us. Because this is why we do these programs, to support people. So thank you to David McLeod, David Tyrrell, and Scott Holmes for joining me for this program. It's been an absolute pleasure. Next week, I'm actually going to be sharing a short Reiki experience. So anybody that wishes to join, and I'm just going to open the channel, and you can experience a little bit of Reiki. So it's a little bit of chill time. So that I won't be gassing too much. It will be about hopefully you feeling the energy and being able to relax into who you are. So I hope you'll join us for that. And the following week, we have a Q&A. So if you've got any questions for us, please let us have those questions. You know, sort of, we'd love to have those questions from you, because that's what our program is going to be about, answering your questions. In the meantime, thank you to all of you. Take care, be safe, stay well. Love, peace, and light. Namaste.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.